So that brings us to the next story that we want to get into, and that is Brianna Johnson and Dr. Johnson, known as online as the Fibroid Slayer. And as I
Yes.
was studying and just looking into his background, he talked about in an interview that he was giving one day that as a very young person, he saw the disparities for himself and he knew that he wanted to impact those things, and that the technique that he uses to remove these very large fibroids, she's not the first person that he has removed large fibroids. He's done multiple surgeries on women with 20-pound fibroids. Brianna Johnson's fibroid was 27 pounds, but he has done this surgery on multiple women, Black women, that felt that they didn't have any other options but to have a hysterectomy and lose their fertility, as was being suggested for Brianna Johnson. And he said, this technique that I have developed, I taught it to myself because I knew what Black women were facing. And I wanted to be able to change the trajectory for their fertility. So I'm just going to bring her and Dr. Perry on the screen so we can look at their lovely faces as we get into what it means to have your fertility matter or not, what it means for one group of people's fertility to be sacred and protected, and another group's not. For anyone that may have missed the story, I mean, I don't know how you could have, but just in case you did, Brianna Johnson was 17 weeks pregnant. She had gotten to multiple clinicians trying to save this very desired pregnancy, but had this 27-pound fibroid that was pressing down on her uterus, making it very risky for her to continue this pregnancy. It made it a very high possibility that the pregnancy would not continue because of the size of this fibroid. And she was told to terminate the pregnancy. She was told to have a hysterectomy through a T incision, no less, rendering her infertile because now she has no womb. And she was able to get to Dr. Perry, who was able to remove this fibroid and preserve her pregnancy, not just her fertility, but to even still preserve this pregnancy. What are your thoughts on that, Helena?
Well, I'll reveal here that in 2001, I lost a pregnancy due to a large fibroid. My fibroid was 16 centimeters. It wasn't quite as big as this young woman's, but it was big. I subsequently had a myomectomy, but this option was not available. But my thoughts are that it is a hell of a thing, and I mean that with every fiber of my being. It is a hell of a thing to be in the medical space and sit back and watch how developments happen for other people, not only longevity, but to have quality of life, and to have things like fertility. The disconnect with Black women in fertility is the inside out thinking that, oh, Black women have a lot of babies, that racist thinking, and that they wouldn't need something like this. And here a Black man decided to go deeper and unpack and say, well, this is a problem that I'm seeing in 70% of people who look like me, because that is the statistical data. And I'm going to always be one who brings the statistical data. Upwards of 65 to 70% of all Black women at some time during their reproductive life will have fibroids. And so this Black man saw this issue and said, hey, something needs to be done about this, because during the time of pregnancy, when a person has a fibroid, obviously the pregnancy hormones are increasing to feed the pregnancy. Well, they also do something else. They feed fibroids. And so the fibroids that a woman already have can grow rapidly at times when they're pregnant. Or people who have issues may go into a pregnancy already having a rather large fibroid that then all just goes ahead and gets even larger during the early parts of their pregnancy when the hormones are rapidly infusing the bloodstream. And so for him to realize this problem and decide, hey, let me do something about it. Let me develop a special technique because I want to preserve the wombs of these women. They deserve to be mothers too. They deserve not to have their fertility destroyed and not to lose desired pregnancies. I think he's just a hero for Black women.
And just to add to what you're saying about this propagandizing of Black women as hypersexual, having a lot of babies, having high fertility rates, there are a number of Black women that suffer with infertility for a number of reasons. Uterine fibroids likely being the leading cause. It's very high in the Black community. A lot of Black women also are afflicted with PCOS, polycystic
Yes.
ovarian syndrome. And so their fertility is impacted in that way. And because of the disparities in access to care, quality of care, delayed diagnosis, financial barriers, when people can pay to have fertility treatments, this is a huge, it's very expensive, and there are often multiple rounds required to have a successful pregnancy. All of these barriers get in the way of having children for Black women, as quiet as it's kept. So to hear RFK say, it is for everyone and it's covering everyone, it is not. And I really commend Summer Lee for bringing the fire, because it needs to be brought when we have people like the Secretary of Health and Human Services speaking out of pocket in that way. So yes, Dr. Perry is an absolute hero, and I loved his story, just hearing about how he went the extra mile because of what he saw and what he could do in his capacity as a clinician to change that trajectory. I want to get into something else that folks, I think, need to be aware of when it comes to the remarks and the mindset that was being put forth by RFK Jr. Because this, while this woman didn't have a maternal death or a fetal death, her fertility, this is about reproductive rights, right? And reproductive justice. Her fertility was put at risk. And if she hadn't gotten to Dr. Perry, she may have lost out on the opportunity to bear her own children.
I think his name is Pierre.
Pierre.
Pierre?
Excuse me, thank you.
Yeah.
Pierre Johnson, yes. Thank you. Yes, Pierre Johnson. I want to get into this here for folks who may not be familiar with this part of Fannie Lou Hamer's life, because a lot of people know about Fannie Lou Hamer being a civil rights activist, being someone that was brutally beaten for standing up for the right for Black people to vote, and lived with long-term damage from the beating he took, trying to get the right for Black people to vote. But I don't know that people are aware of the fact that Fannie Lou Hamer's fertility was taken away from her. Her husband wanted to have a large family, and she underwent what was called the Mississippi appendectomy. She went into the hospital for one thing and came out without her womb. This was a practice that was done, and Helena already touched on this, the southern states that have a long history. This is where I got Perry from. Fannie Lou Hamer's husband's name was Perry. She underwent this procedure, and it was quite common in those states to go in for one thing and come out without a womb. So this is not something that is new. This is why being able to bring context, to use language, to have grants and funding and research and literature out there that brings these types of things to the forefront when it comes to the reproductive rights of Black women is so important. That we can't just say that a uniform way of legislating the outcomes in reproductive health is going to be a solution. Helena, your thoughts on the Mississippi appendectomy?
I mean, the experimentation that has been done in this country on Black women, and I'm going to also lift up our Puerto Rican sistren as well, because hysterectomies, Mississippi appendectomies, and what they were calling them in Puerto Rico when the United States took over Puerto Rico as a territory, there were multiple unwanted. There's a whole generation. I'm not going to say multiple unwanted. There is a generation of women who got forced hysterectomies in Puerto Rico and in the southern states as well. And quite frankly, sometimes these practices came up north for Black women as well. And so when we see these discussions talk about who gets what and who doesn't get what, I'm going to boldly say that Black women are owed these things because of this history and because of what has happened to our foremothers, from the non treatment of disease, to the maltreatment, to the disparities, to the racism, to the experimentation, to back to slavery, to the forced breeding, to the rape. This is her story. This is who we are. This is what we carry with us. And that is part of the legacy of fear and of the medical apartheid that we experience down to today. And so when we look at a person being in denial about not only the history that we hold, and I'm using the word hold purposefully, but also the history that we still endure, the history that we endure now, it becomes problematic of them representing our needs as people who need healthcare. It becomes problematic representing what we desire, what we need, what we are owed. And it becomes problematic standing up for how we can be healed and really move forward in subsequent generations.
And the issue for me, practicing in these medicalized spaces as a midwife, as a Black woman living in a Black body, and I hear these conversations about shared decision making and client centered care and community centered care, that it sounds nice. There's a deep disservice and a deep unconsciousness that goes on in these medical spaces, in my observation, that does not account for the history that people are coming with. It doesn't account for the fact that when folks are declining, I will always correct people that say, oh, this person is refusing. No one's
That's right.
refusing anything. If we believe in shared decision making, the person is declining.
Declining.
They have gotten the information that they need, and they have the legacy that they're bringing into the hospital and then to whatever medical space they're in that informs them that I don't want this if I don't need to have it. I don't trust this to work for me because my ancestors have been through a lot.
Right.
There have been a lot of experimentation done on us. So when I see people using these types of coercive techniques that, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, there's nothing client-centered about that. There is nothing shared about that. And it's very unconscious to believe that people should trust. Even looking on the global stage at the outcomes of the United States compared to resource nations, why would anyone trust us at all coming into a medical space? We've got to earn the trust of the people, and that is just completely lost in a lot of spaces that I practice in. So I will always push back on people's deeds because their words are nice, but their deeds don't line up as far as I can see. It's far and few between and very rare that a person can really talk the talk and walk the walk when it comes to centering the client and their needs and their wants and what they deserve.
It was only just a few years ago, the practice of women being vaginally examined without their consent while under anesthesia was stopped. So, let's talk about it. Okay. So, we're not, and that's for all women. That wasn't a Black woman thing. So I want to be clear. That was for all women. You could go there for a real appendectomy or a real anything and wake up and be like, somebody was in my vagina. Okay. Unless you were aware and you had explicitly wrote something on your consent form because you are maybe in the medical field and were aware that this thing happened to people who were, put asleep for medical procedures. This happened. And it wasn't until women got together and legislation had to be passed. And there's a really horrible New York Times article that I remember about 2 years ago where this was being discussed, and you had clinicians right in the damn comments talking about this is how people learn. How dare you women not give us this opportunity? Well, get your girlfriend to do it. Like, tell your mama to come. No, people have a right, because in any other place outside of a medical facility, going inside somebody's vagina would be rape. Hello. So when we look at, what is happening to all women, and I always like to lift this up in talks that I have and that I have given, it is not lost on me that what all other races and cultures of women turn a blind eye to, don't know about, or allow, because it's one of three: turn a blind eye to, don't know about, or allow to happen to Black women, it ends up happening to all women.
Hey, say it again. Say it again.
Okay.
Yes.
So what other races and cultures of all women don't know about, turn a blind eye to, or just allow. They know about it, but they allow. Maybe they're in medical professionals themselves, and they feel pressured, and this is just what's done. I've had clinicians who are colleagues, who I've had great relationships with over time, who I've had to challenge, and them say to me, well, Helena, this is just what was done in my residency. This is what was allowed. And then I had to say, but would you like it? Especially if they were a woman. But would you like it? Or if it was your daughter or your mama, when it was a male colleague, would you like it? And if your answer is no, then I really question why it's okay, or it was okay, for you to do this to other people. And that is the consciousness that we have to come with when we are in caring professions. That is the consciousness we have to come with. If you wouldn't like it for yourself, or your sister, or your mama, or your daddy, or your son, or your cousin, then I'm really wondering why you walk into a building and you think it's okay for other people, and at times you've even participated. That is really that's really when we move past a conscious question to a soul question. What's really going on? Because there's other ways to learn than to do it without consent. There are people who will let you do it. There are people who you can hire and pay to practice on. So why are you violating a person when they're unconscious and can't give consent? When in any other genre, like outside in these streets, that's against the law. So, we really need to look at the umbrella of medicine is sometime, and has sometime, that been used as a shroud for wrongdoing and the perpetuation of wrongdoing.
Well, when we talk about the medical industrial complex, that's what comes along with some of this. That there is a consciousness that is people are indoctrinated in, and they feel like if they speak out. I mean, I've spoken to students at various levels, and when I talk about being able to pull out wrongdoing, they're always so curious about how to do it, because they're taught to just go along to get along. And if you don't go along, you're going to be ostracized, and you'll be an outsider.
Or you might fail your rotation.
Or you might fail your rotation. Exactly, because you're a problem. So that is part of the indoctrination that I see. And it is the litmus test to ask oneself, is it something that I would allow for myself, or I would want for my loved one? And if not, then you have to question your consciousness. I remember working with a very beloved physician colleague, lovely OBGYN. And I was walking past the labor room, and I heard someone howling. So me being, the advocate that I am, I wanted to know what the hell was going on. So I go in the room, and I see my colleague's arm in this woman's vagina, her mother and her partner at the head of the bed holding her down. And I went in, I pulled my badge forward. I introduced myself. I'm Miss Finn. I'm one of the midwives. Do you want this? They were doing a procedure to help her induction to move along. And her mother looked at me and said, but she has to have it. This is a part of the indoctrination as well, that the client also believes that whatever is said has to happen. There is no shared decision making happening. There is no acculturating the client into a different way of thinking, that we're not patriarchal, that we're not going to tell you what to do, that you do have choice in this. There's none of that happening. So my colleague's arm is still in her vagina, and the mother is telling me she has to have it done. And I said, that is never true ever anywhere you go. You always have a decision. Do you
Correct.
want this? She said no. I said, then we're gonna stop. I'm almost there is another thing that I hear a lot in OB. I'm almost there. You ain't there yet. She don't want it. So we're gonna stop. So these are the things that go on because of indoctrination in this way of thinking. So for me, it is always about in any interaction with a client, because my colleagues, it's going to take some time for them to see something different and be willing to step into something different. I'm not saying that these people are not out there, but by and large, this is what I see when I go into medical spaces. I can only speak from my own experience, but it is my mission to educate every client on what their rights are and how to stand in those rights confidently, no matter what the institution is telling them and the mindset of the people in the space.
Or their family.
Or their family. That is absolutely correct.